There is something buried in this town. A secret, a curse. There is a legend here that stalks the very memory of this place. A nameless shadow, a ghost of sorts, has attached itself here. But what it is exactly, nobody knows. This is Hexham, a market town and civil parish located in Northumberland, England. It is a small, quiet town which bears ancient origins. It was a settlement founded by the Romans and later populated by the Anglo-Saxons. This place has been the site of much bloodshed and horror. Like many towns near the Anglo-Scottish border, Hexham suffered greatly in the border wars between the kingdoms of England and Scotland, including attacks from William Wallace, who burnt down the town in 1297. In 1464, during the Wars of the Roses, the Battle of Hexham was fought somewhere to the south of the town. The defeated Lancastrian commander, Henry Beaufort, was executed in Hexham Marketplace. In 1873, the word Hexham was used in the borders as a euphemism for hell. It was perhaps inevitable then that something would emerge here. During the winter of 1904, local reports started to emerge, describing a great slaughter of livestock by a seemingly unknown predator. Panic would slowly invade Hexham and the neighbouring town of Allendale, as an unknown shadow would continue to eviscerate the local cows and sheep. Blood would continue to be shed as rumours and whispers would begin to paint an image of a hellhound stalking and attacking livestock, leaving nothing but blood and death in its path. Local militias were formed at the behest of the frightened locals. The devil was afoot, and soon he would be hunted. At last, the beast was slain. Its body lay dead. This monster, as it would turn out, was in fact nothing more than a wolf, which had escaped a nearby zoo. However, the horror it inflicted would seal its place in local history. It would become known as the Hexham Wolf, or the Wolf of Allendale. A strange terror had been released into the air around Hexham. With the death of the wolf, the locals concluded that this was the end of the matter. Little did they know, it was only the beginning. The years would pass by quietly as the memory of this strange local oddity would slowly fade. That would be until one day in 1971, when two young boys would unearth something in their own back garden that would not only revive the memory of the Hexham Wolf, but also the terror that came with it. They had just unearthed an ancient horror. The Hexham Heads. It was an unremarkable day on 3 Reed Avenue, Hexham. Two young boys, brothers, Colin and Leslie Robson, had found themselves caught up in innocent mischief in their back garden. They were engaged in a somewhat destructive game involving pulling up weeds and digging holes in the earth. It is funny how often innocent curiosity can uncover the darkest of secrets. One of the boys, in the process of digging a hole, found something. What was it? Laying in the dirt, it looked like some kind of overtly smooth stone. Unremarkable on first glance, but when looking at it more clearly, there was something unnatural about it. Picking up the stone to examine it properly, the boy was confronted by a face carved into it. This was not merely a stone, but rather it was some kind of sculpted head. Inviting his brother over, Colin showed him the strange stone head. He too was puzzled by this odd discovery. Fueled by curiosity, both Colin and Leslie continued to dig around the hole they were stood in. And before long, a second head had been unearthed. Needless to say, these were very strange items to be found buried in one's back garden. The stone heads were roughly the size of a tennis ball and appeared to be carved from solid rock. Proud of their unique find, the two brothers took the heads and brought them into the house. The unearthed heads found a new home on the windowsill of the boys' bedroom. There they sat and silently watched. The occurrences that followed were subtle at first, almost plausible. When the boys woke up in the morning, they felt sure that the heads were not in the same positions they left them in. Perhaps their parents or sister had moved them for whatever reason. This trend would continue, with the heads seemingly vanishing overnight, only to reappear in different rooms of the house. Perhaps someone was playing a strange but playful joke. However, this element of playfulness would not last long. Bottles and other glass items would seemingly smash and break of their own accord. Later, shards of glass were found hidden in the sister's bed. The parents, of course, chastised the two brothers for playing such dangerous and hateful pranks, only for them to angrily deny they ever did such a thing. An air of growing malevolence had entered the family home. This would only escalate further. One night, Mrs. Robson was awoken by the sounds of screaming and crying coming from her son's bedroom. She rushed in to find Colin sitting up in bed, disheveled and crying. The room was dark, only dimly illuminated by the boy's bedside lamp. Mrs. Robson consoled Colin, and of course asked him what was wrong. Clearly distressed and agitated, the boy had claimed that some invisible force had attacked him by violently yanking and tugging at his hair. Mrs. Robson continued to console her son. He had obviously suffered some sort of nightmare. As the boy insisted he was not dreaming, Mrs. Robson fell silent as she became increasingly aware of a presence in the room. Looking towards the open door, in the grainy darkness, a figure seemed to materialize. It was not clear exactly who it was, or what it was. The figure stood tall in the dark doorway, but it was the face that stood out the most. It was not human. This creature appeared to have had the face of a goat or sheep. Mrs. Robson was frozen in place, and as suddenly as the figure appeared, it had vanished like a shadow in the dark. It was just a figment of a tired mind. Mrs. Robson sighed to herself The stress and lack of sleep was clearly having an effect. She pushed the shadow to the back of her mind and clung on to her rationalization. She consoled Colin once more before returning to bed, feeling slightly more unsettled than before. A few days later, Mrs. Robson was confronted by her neighbour, Nellie Dodd. Nellie seemed distressed and agitated. When Mrs. Robson pried and asked her what was wrong, Nellie confided something dark, something inexplicable. Nellie described an incident which took place one evening in her daughter's bedroom. She related how, a few days prior, both Nellie and her daughter were attacked by some kind of shadow. Mrs. Robson listened in cold silence. Was it an intruder? A burglar, perhaps? It wasn't human. This creature was described as reaching out from the darkness in an attempt to grab Nellie with its clawed hands. When Nellie and her daughter screamed in retaliation, the creature fled, running on all fours, vanishing into the darkness of the house. This thing appeared to be humanoid in appearance, although seemed to be composed of multiple different animals. Its body was apparently covered in black wild fur, with legs resembling that of a dog or wolf. Its hands were clawed and elongated, but it was the face that stood out most. It seemed to have the face of a goat or wolf or something in between. It was incomprehensible. Mrs. Robson went cold as she slowly began to realize that something otherworldly may have been unearthed the moment her sons brought those stone heads into the house. For the next few weeks, both the Robson and Dodds families would continue to suffer from further inexplicable attacks from forces unknown. Glass items would continue to smash as they would be thrown across the room by an invisible force. The children of both families would complain of getting slapped and hit in the middle of the night. And of course, that shadow would continue to lurk in the darkness, tormenting the families to despair. Enough was enough. The decision was made to rid themselves of these cursed heads. The arrangement was made for Southampton University to acquire the heads so they could be studied further. When the heads were finally taken away, the strange events suffered by the Robson and Dodds families slowly started to abate. But this was not the end of the Hexham Heads. As Southampton University acquired the heads, they eventually found their way into the hands of Dr. Anne Ross, an expert in ancient artifacts. She was in charge of carrying out the necessary tests and analysis of the stones, and in by doing so, she had inadvertently taken temporary ownership of them. This ownership led to her keeping the stones at her house. It was strange little things at first. Items falling off shelves, doors opening and shutting of their own accord. A cold presence. Almost plausible, though not for long. Dr. Ross would describe waking up one morning to see a half-man, half-wolf creature walking out of her room. Completely stunned, and as if on autopilot, she followed the creature downstairs, heading towards the kitchen where she lost sight of it. A few days later, the daughter of the home, Bernice, saw the creature standing in the upstairs hallway. Before Bernice could even react, the creature vaulted the banister and hit the ground downstairs, where it promptly vanished. She too was seized by a strange compulsion to follow the creature, but it was nowhere to be found in the house. A few days following this, she saw it again when she got home from school. It was standing at the top of the stairs. Thoroughly traumatized at this point, she consoled to her father what she had seen. The father angrily demanded that the stones be removed from the house. They were quickly placed into storage in Southampton University. Following this, the story of a strange werewolf-like cryptid once again stalking Hexham and its surrounding areas got local traction and was quickly whispered about nationwide. Following the growing attention around Hexham, a former resident and someone who used to live in the Robson house, Desmond Craigie, claimed to have made the stones himself. He displayed examples of stones he made as proof. However, when these stones were compared to the Hexham Heads, there were many discrepancies to be found. The first was that the quality and intricacies of the carving was not matched by Craigie. The second was that Craigie's stones were made from cement and compacted materials. The Hexham Heads, on the other hand, were carved from solid rock, without a single piece of organic matter to be found within them. The analysis carried out by Dr. Ross and Southampton University strongly indicated that these heads were not a modern artifact. They were ancient. It is highly likely that the Hexham Heads are in fact Celtic in origin. Whilst the Celts never founded the town of Hexham, we do know that they once inhabited the surrounding areas. During the time of Roman occupation, the Romans employed Celtic mercenaries to patrol Hadrian's Wall, which is only a few miles north of Hexham. Much of ancient Celtic culture is shrouded in mystery, but we do know that depictions of the human head carried great spiritual significance. It is widely believed that many Celtic tribes sought to remove the heads of their enemies, not merely as a means of execution, but as a way of gaining spiritual insight. The heads of the wisest were seen as the most valuable for this purpose. As such, these heads would be kept as important trophies and conduits to a spiritual realm. Could this also be the case for the Celtic tribes that once inhabited the area surrounding Hexham? It is possible. The Hexham Heads, through study, appear to be male and female, the female apparently having the features of an old hag. The heads also had tendrils attached to the necks, which have since become lost, implying that they were perhaps more than just heads. The Celts viewed the human head as a gateway to the spiritual world. It was the part of the body where all thought and knowledge sprang from. Stone carvings of heads have often been found near bodies of water. Rivers in particular were also viewed as shortcuts to a spiritual plane. If the Hexham Heads are truly Celtic in origin, is the creature that was described also of Celtic origin? Going by appearances alone, there is one entity from Celtic mythology that bears a slight resemblance to the Hexham creature. The Celtic god Canunus was often depicted as a humanoid entity made up of different types of animals. He was regarded as the god of all creatures. Obviously, we are nowhere near any sort of solid conclusion. We are deep within the realm of mystery, which is why this story will continue to endure. A curious thing to note is this particular photograph of Colin and Leslie displaying one of the heads. Except this actually isn't one of the Hexham Heads. This head was sculpted out of clay during the boys' art class. The teachers found their creation disturbing, but the curious thing about this image is the fact that this head was sculpted before the Hexham Heads had even been discovered. It would seem that fascination with the human head was not unique to the ancient Celts. So, where are the heads now? Whilst they were in storage, the stones were bought by an engineer named Frank Hyde. He was eager to subject the heads to his own tests. The outcome of his testing, however, was never concluded, as he died in 1984, leaving his results unpublished. The location of the heads had also died with him. Nobody knows where they are. There is something buried in this town. A secret, a curse, a matter of time.